India's top military leadership has increasingly stressed a doctrine of clarity and decisiveness when confronted by terrorist violence emerging from across the border. In a recent interaction, Chief of Defense Staff General Anil Chauhan was asked a simple but powerful question by a student. How exactly did India know Pakistan was behind the deadly attack in Pahalgam? His reply offered a rare insight into the intelligence, tracking, and retaliatory measures that underpin India's counter-terrorism strategy. He made it clear that the crucial breakthrough came from tracking the very device terrorists were using, which pinpointed their infiltration route through the Sarjal sector. By openly striking the location from which they infiltrated, India took the unusual but deliberate step of signaling to Pakistan, "We not only know who was behind it, but also where they came from, and we are prepared to hit back with precision if required." This statement, brief though it was, encapsulates years of development in India's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, as well as wider changes in military posture since the late 1990s. The Pahalgam attack had shaken the valley. For India, the key question after every such attack has always been attribution, figuring out with certainty who masterminded or enabled it. In the past, ambiguity often held India back from internationalizing Pakistan's role in supporting cross-border terror. But over the years, a combination of technical intelligence, TechInt, electronic intercepts, SIGINT, and human intelligence, HUMINT, has closed that gap considerably. Chauhan's account reinforces this reality. The mobile device or communication terminal carried by the attacking group was not just monitored but actively backtracked, giving Indian agencies an exact location of infiltration. That technological ability acts as both deterrent and evidence. The Sarjal sector, from which he said the terrorists crossed over, sits along one of the poorest stretches of the line of control, where infiltration routes have historically been active. These narrow valleys and forested ridges provide cover, making them attractive for groups trained and pushed in by handlers based in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Indian forces have known this for years, but having real-time confirmation through device tracking is game-changing. Chauhan explained that after tracing the movement, Indian forces conducted an attack on that very sector, not merely to eliminate the facilitators, but to demonstrate strategic awareness. In asymmetric warfare, this signaling is as significant as tactical reprisals. When India strikes the origin point of infiltration, it sends messages in multiple directions. To Pakistan's deep state that their proxies are exposed, to the Indian public that the state will not passively absorb losses, and to the international community that India can credibly attribute cross-border terror activity to its source. This marks a continuing evolution from the restraint-heavy policies of earlier decades. For long, Indian governments struggled to demonstrate conclusively, in the heat of an attack, that Pakistani elements were responsible. Even though groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed were openly based on Pakistani soil, Pakistan benefited from plausible deniability because India often lacked immediate, granular evidence to prove responsibility. After the 1999 Kargil conflict, where Pakistan's direct involvement was irrefutably established, New Delhi began systematically investing in surveillance assets, from satellite imagery to electronic warfare units, all designed to fill that attribution void. By the time of the 2016 Uri attack, India had matured enough to not only identify responsibility quickly, but respond through surgical strikes. The 2019 Pulwama attack and the subsequent Balakot airstrike extended that trajectory, widening the scope of what India considered fair retaliation. Chauhan's comment about Pahalgam fits squarely into this doctrine. India now consistently signals that it can detect patterns, identify routes, and retaliate directly, refusing to grant Pakistan the space that ambiguity once afforded. What makes the tracking of the device extraordinary is that it demonstrates how far India's counterterrorism grid has penetrated technologically. Mobile devices carried by infiltrators can now act as their own undoing. With advanced triangulation, integration of satellite feeds, and digital surveillance systems along the line of control, India can map not just where infiltrators are at present, but also trace their journey backwards to the originating launch pads. By launching an air or artillery strike on such origin points, India collapses the old Pakistani strategy of rotating proxies in plausible secrecy. Sarjal became one such target as a result of this intelligence fusion. Though General Chauhan did not share operational details, the underlying lesson was clear. There is now no attack whose source India cannot expose, no infiltration that can proceed under complete deniability. This also reflects a wider institutional change, where the armed forces and intelligence agencies operate in greater synchronization. Traditionally, technical intelligence often remained locked within agencies like the Research and Analysis Wing or the technical branches of the military. In recent years, however, there has been deliberate fusion. Operational commanders on the ground receive inputs from central intelligence establishments in near real time. That allowed the device carried by the Pahalgam attackers to be tracked, its signals geotagged, and actionable coordinates relayed to strike platforms. This is not a one-off phenomenon. Analysts note that the integrated defense staff has been deliberately tasked with breaking silos to ensure that every arm of the state contributes to counter-infiltration success. Chauhan's retelling underscores this point without spelling it out explicitly. The symbolism of retaliating at the precise point of infiltration cannot be overstated. Wars are not only fought with guns, but also through narratives. Pakistan thrives on a narrative that militancy inside Kashmir is indigenous, disconnected from the state apparatus across the border. Every time India produces evidence or visibly hits back at launch pads just across the line of control, that narrative is weakened. In military terms, India creates deterrence by punishment, demonstrating to handlers that the cost of infiltration will not only fall on the pawns, but also on those controlling the chessboard. In political terms, such operations quieten domestic criticism that India is a soft state, as was often heard after major terror strikes in the 2000s. And in diplomatic terms, this demonstrates credibly to global partners that India is not making hollow accusations, but has hard geolocation to support its claims. The Sarjal strike after Pahalgam made precisely this case. One of India's great challenges in this domain has been balancing the imperatives of secrecy with the public's demand for accountability. On one hand, many of the surveillance methods and analytical frameworks cannot be revealed without compromising their effectiveness against future infiltrators. On the other hand, the public and political opposition demand proof after every claim of cross-border strikes or infiltration interdictions. By choosing to speak openly about the device tracking in an educational forum, General Chauhan walked this balance carefully, revealing just enough to bolster credibility, but not so much as to compromise sources and methods. His candor also indicates confidence in India's technological edge, suggesting that the capacity has become robust enough that occasional mentions do not degrade operational advantage. Indeed, Pakistani handlers will now know that even devices they instruct militants to carry can betray them, but their options to avoid such betrayals are increasingly limited in a digitized battlefield. It is also significant that this revelation came in a candid exchange with a student rather than a calculated press briefing. This reflects the cultural change within the armed forces leadership, where explaining decisions transparently to youth, academics, and civil society is seen as part of overall national integration. For decades, military officers carefully avoided declaring operational detail in public. Today, leaders like General Chauhan share broad contours of sensitive operations precisely to assure citizens that India's military is not reactive but proactive. This assurance builds political resilience. After Pahalgam, such disclosures reassure local communities in Kashmir that infiltrators cannot hide, reinforce to the broader Indian public that retaliation is calibrated, and warn Pakistan that concealment is futile. The attack on Sarjal also fits into the larger pattern of what some analysts call India's visible deterrence strikes. Unlike full-scale wars, these are calibrated hits on terrorist launch pads, bunkers, or infiltration routes identified through high-confidence intelligence. After Uri in 2016, the concept gained widespread currency, with surgical strikes making front-page headlines. After Balakot in 2019, air-delivered kinetic response was added to the doctrine. The Sarjal strike is the latest iteration, though less widely publicized. It demonstrates continuity in policy, track, attribute, strike, and signal. The fact that Chauhan casually explained the logic behind it shows these steps are no longer extraordinary events, but part of routine operational policy. For India, this normalization may be the greatest achievement, making it undeniable to both adversaries and allies that any attack will automatically trigger a determined, traceable counter. Another important implication lies in India's messaging to the global counter-terrorism community. By meticulously attributing attacks like Pahalgam through technical verification, New Delhi strengthens its diplomatic hand at forums like the UN Security Council or the FATF, where it has campaigned to keep Pakistan under scrutiny for terror financing and support. Device-based tracking offers forensic evidence that withstands international scrutiny, much stronger than traditional claims or testimonies. When Indian diplomats highlight involvement of Pakistan in global fora, they now speak with the backing of electronically confirmed intelligence. Thus, Chauhan's seemingly simple revelation also hints at the larger pattern of lawfare, using evidence to corner Pakistan globally, compounding the pressure from seen and unseen retaliation on the low sea. Within India's own military ranks, such experiences reinforce the importance of modernization. To track devices in rugged terrain requires advanced communication intercept stations, satellite support, drones to relay signals, and teams trained to exploit metadata. For decades, Indian counter-infiltration relied mostly on human scouts and patrols, often at the cost of heavy casualties. Today, with layered integration of technical resources, the risk is reduced and the effectiveness enhanced. This is why infiltration numbers in recent years have sharply declined compared to the peak insurgency years. Pahalgam stands as a tragic reminder that infiltration persists, yet the countermeasures show marked improvement. Chauhan's anecdote demonstrates operational success even against difficult odds, a reassuring signal to the rank-and-file soldiers standing guard at night. When examining India's historical record with Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, each major attack became a turning point. The 2001 Parliament attack ultimately led India to overhaul border deployment through Operation Parakram. The 2008 Mumbai attacks exposed glaring gaps in intelligence fusion, prompting the establishment of the National Investigation Agency and strengthened coastal surveillance. The 2016 Uri attack catalyzed targeted cross-border raids. Pulwama in 2019 thrust India into the aerial escalation with Balakot. In each cycle, Pakistan sought to reset the board by banking on India's hesitation. Yet the Sarjal episode illustrates that hesitations are decreasing. Attribution is faster, retaliation is sharper, and transparency about responsibility is higher. This diminishes the window in which Pakistan can safely operate through proxies. By narrating this in a straightforward exchange, General Chauhan was essentially underlining that India will not walk back to earlier patterns of ambiguity. Ultimately, the tracking of a single device tells a broader tale. It is the story of India's cumulative adaptation in statecraft, technology, and military response over decades of asymmetric warfare. Gone are the days when infiltrators could melt away behind a veil of plausible deniability. Today, even in rugged terrain, India's networked intelligence grid can follow their traces, reconstruct their path, and punish their sponsors. The Sarjal attack was less about eliminating a launch point than about enforcing a new normal. Every act of terror will carry a burden of exposure for its masters. Pahalgam may have been one more assault in Pakistan's long-tolerated playbook, but the response marked one more assertion of India's refusal to forget or forgive. General Anil Chauhan's answer reminded his audience that national security is not an abstract chess game, but a series of very specific choices under fire. His words provided students an entry into the real mechanics of intelligence-led warfare, where a phone carried by a militant can become the cord that unravels an entire cross-border conspiracy. It was not just an inspiring anecdote, but also a subtle lesson in deterrence, adaptation, and constant vigilance. For those listening, the underlying message was simple. India now knows, quicker and deeper than ever, who is behind attacks, and it will act on that knowledge with decisive strength. This candid truth stands as both a warning and a reassurance, capturing where India's military resolve truly stands today.